In this next video, what we're going to do is we're going to take our data wrangling plan and go ahead and execute that. Now, keep in mind that to wrangle data, every analysis is going to look different. In this example, I'm going to be using quite a few VLOOKUPs in order to look up data to create new columns, remove columns, hide columns, and so forth. But your data wrangling will look different than this. This is a rather detailed example of data wrangling, so you might want to fast forward through things that you're already familiar with. If you're not familiar with Excel, this might be a good video to watch in full so that you can see an example of how to use some of the functions in Excel to wrangle your data. So now with our data plan, our data wrangling plan in place, we're going to go ahead and execute that. So the first step is to remove these columns here that don't have any data in them. So that's going to be column, in this case it's column E, column F. I'm holding down the control key as I select the columns that I want to delete. So I hold down the control key, move to the letter above, we can see that black arrow, and click, and those select, that way I can select multiple columns. And if I right click now, I can select delete, and then those columns are deleted. And those are the columns I want to delete because the rest of the columns have data in them. So next, what I want to do is hide all the columns that are not going to be relevant to my study. So in this case, all the data is specific to courses offered in the CIS department. So anything that's related to the department, to the school in which the department exists within, that's going to be consistent all the way through, and it's really not relevant to the data. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the faculty department name. I'll select the entire column and right click and select hide. And so now you can see that there's that F to an H, so there's a column G is hidden in there. So it still exists, but it's just not going to be visible. And this kind of gets that field or column out of the way. And I'm going to want to do the same thing to department ID, which is column Q. I'll hide that as well. And I want to do this with the department abbreviation, as well as division ID and also the school. So those are all items that are related to the department that are going to be consistent across all data elements, so it's really not important. So there's some other fields that I want to hide as well. So I'm going to hide columns that are already derived elsewhere. So things like term ID, I will already know that. And I can tell that from this term name here. So the term ID is not going to be relevant. So I'm going to hide that. And then over on the campus area, there's some fields that as well that can be derived, so I don't need them and I want to get them out of the way. So like the campus ID is not going to be relevant. I can derive that from this other campus name. So I'm going to hide that. I'm going to remove the campus name as well, or hide the campus name, because that's an attribute of the abbreviation. All right, so now we want to do some renaming here. So the first is going to be renaming this fac person ID. That's kind of an awkward field name, and really what that could be just renamed as faculty ID. And I'm going to be consistent, keep this all uppercase. Call that faculty ID. All right, and then campus abbreviation, that's going to be the next one. This campus abbreviation, that's more meaningful if I call that campus code. And I'm trying to be consistent with the naming convention, so it's all uppercase and all kind of one word. Now, next I want to do is take this campus code and convert that into a name of the campus. So what I'm going to do is I'm selecting the column up at the top. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say insert. So I'm inserting a new column and I'm going to call this column just simply campus, uppercase campus. All right, and now I'm going to be deriving a value here, and in order to do so, I'm going to use a lookup table. So what I have over here in the reference column, I set up two lookup tables. One is going to be for campus code because I want to convert some the XO value or the M value to kind of be a more meaningful name as being an online campus or a main campus. So anytime I see XO, I want to convert that to online, and anytime I see an M, I want to convert that to main. So in order to do that, we're going to go back over to the Data tab. And we're going to use what's called a VLOOKUP. So this is going to be a function within Excel that allows me to look up a value in this case, value XO, to get a new result. So I'm going to type in equals VLOOKUP. And then first thing I need to do is identify the value that I want to use to look up, and that will be this XO code here in column Q. So I'll click on that, and then hit comma to enter the next parameter. And next I need to identify the lookup table that I want to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on reference and then select both the values that I'm looking up and the values that I want it to return. So that entire table, table of data. And then I'll hit comma again. And then I want to identify which of these columns 1 or column 2, is going to be returned. So in this case, I want the online or main to be returned. So I'm going to want the second column. So I'm going to type in 2 for the second column and one more comma. And then what I want to do is I need to identify what type of match it's looking for, an approximate match or an exact match. Since this case it's either going to be XO or M, I want it to be an exact match. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on false. So false is, we want to make sure that it is an exact match when we look things up on this table. And then hit my closing parentheses. And there's my code. So with that, it looked up, using the lookup table, it looked up this value and returned the value of online. So now that campus value is updated now. Now, if I take a look at my data, control down arrow, I can see that I have 48,845 rows in this Excel spreadsheet. So I'm not going to want to execute that same formula that many times. Control up arrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat, actually have Excel autofill this same formula all the way down. But before I can do that, what I need to do is to make a change to the formula, because what's going to happen is when I have it autofill, it's going to automatically kind of use relative locations. So it's going to update this row number for every row that it populates. But what it's also going to do is change the row number in that lookup table. So what I need to do is I need to hold the lookup table fixed, because that's not going to be relative to the values being populated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, before the column of my lookup table, I'm going to hit a $sign. That's probably not needed, but I'm going to do it anyway, just to be safe. And then before the row number, I'm also going to hit use a $sign. And same for the column B and row 3. So putting the $signs before the row or the column holds that fixed. So as I do this autofill, it won't update or won't update those values to be relative to the row that it's working on. So when I hit enter, it didn't make a change to the formula. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an autofill. So the quickest way to do that is to put your cursor over that green box that you see here. And once it turns to a plus sign, if I have my cursor over there, now if I double click, it's going to automatically select the entire row, and it's going to populate reproduce the formula all the way down. So you can see down to this last row, it used the same formula, but it updated for each row, and then it uses that fixed lookup table. So now I have use that lookup table to populate the campus field. And so what I'll do is I'm going to do something similar for the term name, that I'm going to extract the semester and year from that. So if I go back over to term name, I'm going to insert 2 columns in this case. I'm going to insert 1 column and then a second column. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be creating 2 more columns. I'm going to call this semester and year. And I'm going to do a VLOOKUP table as well VLOOKUP command to use this data to go to the reference table and to look up, based off of that code, what's the fall name and what's the semester name. So I'm going to go back to my data here, and for my semester, I'm going to do a VLOOKUP, left parentheses, and this is the value that I want to look up in my lookup table, and hit comma. Now I need to identify my lookup table, so that would be going over to the reference tab, and I'm going to select the entire set of data. That's the table that I'm going to use for lookup. Hit comma, and the row that I want to return, or the column that I want to return, is going to be the second column. That's the semester column. So I'm going to type in a 2 here because I want the second column returned, and I'm also going to want this to be an exact match. So I will double click on false as well here, and right parentheses, and hit enter. So you can see it correctly identified the proper semester. And just like before, I'm going to put my dollar signs in here so that I can autofill this formula all the way through. And get that plus sign, double click, and it populated using the lookup table all the way down. All right, so next I want to look up the year. I want to use this term name to identify the year, and I will use my reference table to convert this value right here to the year. So I'm going to do a VLOOKUP, and the value I want is going to be, since my cursor won't let me get to that column, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the column above and then modify that to row 2, and then hit comma, and then I'm going to select the table. So this is the table I want to look up, and hit a comma again. And this time I want column 3, so I'm going to type in a 3 there, and I want another exact match. And then I hit right parentheses, and then I get my data there. I get my result back, 2018, just like I expected. So what I need to do is modify this. I'm going to put my dollar signs to make that an absolute value for my table. Hit enter, and then I'm going to autofill. So get that plus sign, double click, and there we go. It autofilled all the data, and we can see that it looks correct. All right, so there I've hid data, I've deleted columns, I've renamed columns, and I've also inserted columns with a lookup table. Now, one thing that I want to do, and kind of a little tip here, is when you display this spreadsheet now, it has to go out and calculate those lookup values. So the semester, year, those have to be looked up again. So what I like to do is repopulate these fields with the values rather than this code here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, hit Shift Control down, and that selects all the data in there. And I'm going to do a Control C for copy, and then Control up. So then I'm going to start at that first spot, and then a Control. Actually, I'm going to do a paste. And what I want to do is I want to just paste the values, just the value. So it's not going to include that formula. It's just going to be the value of the semester. So I click on Paste Values, and then what you can see now is it replaced the value. Replace the formula with just the value. So now when this page reloads again, it doesn't have to look up those values, do the lookup using that formula. I already have the values in this, and so that will save a lot of time. Again, Control Shift down to select everything, Control C to copy that. I'm going to go to the top and then do a paste special values only, and so now it's going to paste the values, and I no longer have formulas in there. And so what I need to do is also do this for the campus code. So we have that, or the campus, where we have that VLOOKUP there. I'm going to do Control Shift down to copy, Control up to get to the top, and then do a paste special values only. There we go. So I've removed all the formulas, and that really is going to save time when this spreadsheet loads, but all the data is there. But what's important, though, is I recorded the change that I made to the spreadsheet in my notes. So it doesn't look like the data came this way. We can see the manipulations that I had to do in my data wrangling to get the data in this condition. So that's the extent of my data wrangling plan. So this data is ready for further assessment.